Dan, this week we're going to be discussing the topic of Lot being assaulted by his daughters. Is that the best way to say it?
Yeah. There really is a lot of stuff like this in the Bible, And they're like, oh, we need to, get all these other books and ban them.
Right.
I'm just like, well, got to censor the Bible too then.
I mean, it's a good thing that when I was in Catholic school, there were stories that we just didn't read. Right?
I think that's how it is, right?
Right. There are stories that are not for children's ears.
Are you telling? Yeah. Have we ever heard of this before?
Heard of what?
Lot and his daughters.
Yeah, I mean, I have.
Oh, well, I haven't.
I would imagine the Old Testament is pretty new for a lot of people.
I bet actually it is. You get it? Is it old, new? It's funny. All right.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'll read verse 30 for us. Then Lot went up out of Zoar and dwelt in the mountains, and his 2 daughters were with him, for he was afraid to dwell in Zoar, and he and his 2 daughters dwelt in a cave. It's worth pointing out, just in case our viewers didn't watch any of our previous recordings,
they should have, though,
that Sodom and Gomorrah have just been destroyed. Right. So we're picking up right after the city is annihilated, and the survivors, being Lot and his 2 daughters, have escaped, and their mother has unfortunately been turned into a pillar of salt.
It's very sad.
And now they're trying to figure out, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And they end up in a cave outside of Zoar.
Makes perfect sense.
Right.
I mean, he did, tell God, hey, please spare Zoar so I have a place to live. So it would make sense for him to live in a cave.
Right. Well, I mean, where else could you live, right?
Yeah, you could live in Zoar because it was spared.
Right. The funny thing about the Zoar incident is that Lot spent so much time and emphasis on saying, well, it's such a small city, certainly you wouldn't destroy it, let me escape there. And then he turns around and suddenly can't stay there anymore.
Right.
With no explanation as to why, other than, maybe the author, the narrator of the story was implying something that the modern viewer is not able to grasp.
Boy, that happens a lot.
That does happen sometimes.
Very convenient.
As they say, it was lost in translation. Yeah.
So originally Zoar was going to get destroyed with Sodom and Gomorrah. Is that correct?
I actually don't know if that's true, because when Abraham is told about the destruction, Zoar was never mentioned.
Okay.
I mean, Zoar is close in proximity to Sodom and Gomorrah, geographically speaking. So it's possible that God could have easily wiped them out in one swoop, and then chose to save Zoar because of Lot. But also, we're not given an indication that was his plan in the first place.
I don't know. I mean, if Lot is like, hey, please save them, that kind of means that they needed saving, right?
Well, my thought is that Lot and his daughters would have been under the impression that everything was getting destroyed.
Right. In the world?
Yeah, I would say so. For example, and we're about to get there, but Lot's daughters feel like they need to sleep with their father because there are no other men to be with.
Right. That's an interesting point.
Right.
Huh.
I mean, never mind the fact that they were recently just in Zoar, and there had to have been people there. So, I mean, there's some curiosities here.
Yeah, curiosities.
This is another one of those stories in Genesis where it really feels like an editor either goofed or there was a combination of multiple stories that just didn't get weaved together very well. Yeah. Someone had mentioned once, and I jotted it down in my notes, that sometimes when, you think the whole world might be ending, you might be prone to panic-induced thinking.
Sure.
And your cognitive abilities might be hindered. And so making wise decisions probably wasn't a reality at that moment.
Sure, why not? I mean, he saw some angels, talked to God, and that's fine.
Sure.
That's fine, whatever. He doesn't have to have that strong of faith. All right, what's next?
Dan, can you read 31?
Now the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old, and there is no man on the earth to come into us, as is the custom of all the earth. I guess they did think that that was it, you know?
Yeah, and
Nobody
so,
else.
I mean, there's one of two options, right? One is that they believed that there was no men left, or the other option is that this is sort of a turn of phrase, because the word for earth in Hebrew is the same as like land, which often can be used to refer to regional territories. It doesn't have to mean 100% of all the land everywhere. So it's possible that she believed, all of the people of the locally inhabited region were dead.
Except for Zoar.
Yeah, you're right, except for Zoar.
Yeah. Okay.
Which presumably she was with Lot when Lot pleaded for Zoar.
Right.
And if there were indeed men left in Zoar, then surely she would have known that Lot wasn't the only man alive.
Right.
Unless there's a third, maybe there's an alternative here. What if, and this is speculation.
Sure.
What if the Lord spared Zoar, but not the people in Zoar?
Oh.
We're not told.
I know, but that's an interesting point.
Right. What if they got to Zoar and all the inhabitants were gone, but the city itself was still standing? That's just, like I said, it's speculation, but it's a thought.
Yeah.
Back at some of our questioning here, where did they get the idea that there was no man to sleep with? We're not entirely sure. They were just in Zoar. They should have known whether there was somebody there or not. And are we supposed to be under the impression that no city existed outside of Zoar in the nearby region?
Right.
Right.
I guess they just assumed they were all wiped out.
Right. And, on the topic of Lot and his treatment of the daughters, which we've covered before, seems to be pretty poor. It seems to me that if it happened that there were people in Zoar and they left Zoar, it would have been by Lot's doing, not by his daughter's doing. And it seems like maybe he was doing a disservice to his own daughters by excluding them from society and hiding out in the cave, because surely they could have found somebody to, keep the custom of the land with, right? Is it possible that Lot didn't want his daughters marrying somebody from Zoar?
Yeah, if you think Zoar is as bad as Sodom and Gomorrah,
right?
Then yeah,
right. If you believe that Zoar is evil, but it was so small that God shouldn't worry about it, then some of this might make sense. So surely I don't want to give my daughters in marriage to somebody from.
Right. Yeah.
But they were engaged. 2 men in Sodom.
That's
the other daughters, the other 2 daughters.
He didn't seem too unhappy about that.
Right. So we're given no indication at this point that Lot is at all above the people that are being destroyed. He seems to be very similar to them. He's claimed in the New Testament in one spot as being righteous, I believe in 2 Peter, but that's the only New Testament passage that really speaks of it.
Right, and that was thousands of years later, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Dan, can you read your comment on verse 31?
Sure.
As is the custom, I think, is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As is the custom. I suppose Adam's daughters had to have sex with him, or maybe with their siblings. Though, of course, there are no men inside of a cave. I still don't understand why they had Zoar spared just to live in a cave anyhow. all those terrible sinners got to live while the others who Lot didn't intervene for instead were annihilated.
Yeah. Did you mean to write Adam in this?
Yeah.
Oh, just making sure.
Listen, we're talking about Adam in the beginning.
Right.
I mean, who did Adam's daughters have sex with?
Well, I would imagine their siblings.
Or his siblings.
Well, I would imagine siblings.
Or I'm just saying one or the other.
Father-daughter sex, at least in the Jewish mindset, was very, very taboo.
Okay.
And it would have been, even if it happened,
right.
I have a hard time believing any Jewish scribe would be writing that into the story. It was, however, prominent in Mesopotamian, mostly Sumerian mythology.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there was a deity that was so virile, he had sex with his daughters, his granddaughters, and his great-granddaughter.
Okay.
And that seems to be in normal fashion to Sumerian culture. A man so virile that he kind of takes what women he wants.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But in the biblical mindset, that was very shameful. You wouldn't have done that. Then can you read 1932?
Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father.
Yeah.
Yeah, I assume by getting their father drunk, they thought they were doing well, considering a person's legacy was of utmost importance.
Right.
It's nice to have male rape represented, though.
That's a good point.
And apparently it's punished even less severely than female rape, which is to say none whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. That's pretty accurate. When I was a young person, I first read this story. I didn't think of it as rape. As an adult, and I read this, especially in modern society, and I say, if this ever happened to anybody living today, we would call it rape.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I still question whether or not he was mentally present during the experience, only because, and I don't want to get on a whole rabbit trail of how the male genitalia works, but when you get to a certain point of drunkenness, a lot of your bodily features stop functioning the way you would want them to.
Okay.
Right? So the idea that he's going to get so drunk that he can't even recognize his own daughter trying to sleep with him.
Right.
But, everything is still functioning as normal.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems outlandish to me. Like, in order to not know his daughter was sleeping with him, he'd have to be basically passed out.
Mm-hmm.
And if that were the case, is it even possible for him to, we'll say, perform?
I have no idea.
Like, can he ejaculate while passed out? There's no other word for it. If there's a better word, I would use it, but I don't know any.
This video is going to get blacklisted.
We're so getting kicked off of YouTube. Yeah. But it's a legitimate question, right?
Yeah, I know.
If he's that drunk on wine, can he finish?
Right. Yeah. So what you're saying is he was probably at least a little responsible.
Right. So if he wasn't completely blacked out,
right,
then he had to have been at least a tiny bit aware. The biblical writer here is really covering for Lot, I think. That's just,
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. And I've heard some suggest that not only was he aware, but he was okay with it. Which, of course, would greatly emphasize the wickedness of the lineage that comes from, this union that we're going to read about soon.
Okay, stupid question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the lineage that comes from Lot?
Well, it's going to be Ammon and Moab.
Okay, and those people
they're bad people.
Bad people.
Yeah.
Is it possible this is just one of those origin stories to explain why Moab and the other name you said are just bad?
I would say yes.
You know?
I would say this is an origin story, yeah.
And maybe there was no other reason that the writers could think of, but they had to figure out, why they were so bad,
Right.
I mean, do we know that they came from Lot's lineage?
Well, that's the thing is, the story of Lot and his daughters was probably a story that people were familiar with even before the nation of Israel existed. And it wasn't until, the reign of King David or later that somebody tried to craft a narrative that said, hey, that story about Lot and his two daughters. Well, you'll never guess his offspring. Guess who were they? They were Ammon and Moab. You know what I mean? So I'm not sure it had to be completely fictitious.
Mm-hmm.
Just sort of,
So this could have happened.
Sure.
And then that was the end of it. But then much later on, they're like, we need a scapegoat.
That's right.
Why these people groups are so terrible.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's already happened a lot before in the Bible, right?
Yep. And Moab and Israel fought quite extensively. In fact, according to the Moabite stone, or the Mesha Stele, there was a period there in the 9th century where Moab actually took over most of the land of Reuben and partially part of the land of Gad. It was a pretty large war there on the eastern side of the Dead Sea. As far as we can tell by the biblical record, they eventually got that land back before getting utterly destroyed by the Akkadians, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Let's read 1933.
Sure.
Dan, can you read that?
So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose.
Lies. Absolute lies. Okay. There's no way.
All right.
There's no way. I mean, we've already discussed this. I don't know if we need to comment on 33 any more than we already have, unless you have something to share.
No.
I don't buy it.
I got enough. Well, yeah, I don't know that one.
All right. I'll read 34 through 36. It happened on the next day that the firstborn said to the younger, "Indeed, I lay with my father last night. Let us make him drink wine tonight also, and you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve the lineage of our father." Then they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay or when she arose. Thus, both daughters of Lot were with child by their father.
It's interesting because usually I thought women don't really care about lineage that much.
Right.
So it almost feels like it was, Lot imposing his will on them, or...
That's a good point, because I had the exact same thought, was that seems out of place that these two women would be concerned about preserving the lineage. What do they care?
Right.
They're never... The lineage of the female in the Bible is non-existent, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's the name of the man that is...
So it's possible that Lot was like, boy, sure wish I had a son.
Right. Wink, wink, wink.
Yeah.
Whatever shall I do?
Right. Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Now, it is common in the scriptures for the women to be concerned about being childless.
Right.
That's a huge thing. But a concern for preserving the lineage just is not, doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. It was important for most wives and women to have at least one son.
Right, yeah, like Hagar.
Mm-hmm. But that wasn't to preserve the lineage necessarily. It was so that they didn't have to become a destitute widow in their old age.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you suggested that maybe Lot was up to no good, maybe laying down some hints.
Right.
My first thought was maybe this is actually just the opinion of the narrator, trying to impose his opinion on the motives of the two girls.
Okay.
Which, I mean, we would most likely assume the narrator was a man.
Of course, yeah.
Right. So is the narrator putting words on, the lips of the daughters?
Mm.
Or maybe it is Lot's doing. I don't know.
Right, I get that.
Either way, it seems out of place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other thing, again, this is a very sensitive topic, but it has to be talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? The two daughters went in. First daughter went in and slept with him. Second daughter goes in and sleep with him.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, these are two virgins.
Right.
They've never been with a man. Losing your virginity for being a female is sometimes even traumatic. Like, it's a painful process. This is not something that you would take lightly.
Right.
And it seems even less realistic. Not only that Lot was drunk, possibly passed out and couldn't perform, but also that the person doing all the work is a virgin who's never seen a naked man, doesn't know how anything works.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a clue, you know what I mean, about whether or not the thing's finished. Do they need to keep going? Is it so painful? Can they even work through it? So, I don't know. It seems so contrived that two virgin daughters are going to go in and sleep with Lot, having no idea what they're doing. And then they're both going to get pregnant first shot.
Right.
Just like that. So they're just both ovulating. We just have to assume that they're at the prime part of the cycle here.
And even so, it's not like it's certain you'll get pregnant, right?
Right. Oh, yeah. Many people spend years trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
The idea that the two virgins are just going to, fumble their way through it with a drunk man and get pregnant the first time.
Yeah.
I don't buy it. It screams like a narrative with plot holes to me.
Yeah. Plot holes in the Bible?
Never.
No.
There's never been any plot holes in the Bible. Dan, can you read 19:37 through 38?
The firstborn bore a son and called him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. And the younger, she also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the people of Ammon to this day.
Yeah. We've already discussed that these are two people groups that were disliked and were kind of a thorn in the side for the Israelites, even as early as the time of Moses. So one of the things that we're going to need to talk about is the Moabites and Ammonites.
Right.